People who mark exams, what is the funniest thing you've seen in an exam? I was the TAFE for a chemistry class. Someone who clearly had not studied for the exam didn't bother to answer any of the questions. Instead he drew a car on the last page of the exam. It was one of the most beautiful drawings I'd ever seen. So beautiful I felt terrible giving this guy an F. The details, the shadowing, the curves, all was amazing. More so that he did that in 50 minutes. He dropped the class halfway through the semester and I don't know what happened to him after, but I really hope he switched major to something more art related. On a quiz where the students had to fill in 7 missing values on an array calculation, one of the students completely forgot how to do the calculations and so had no answers. My school grades on a 1-4 scale, so anticipating his failure, he wrote into the spaces 1, I, 2, will, 3, have, 4, 2, 5, take, 6, 7, 1. It so happened that it was a correlation coefficient equation, and the final answer was, in fact, 0.998 inches. I told him it was close enough, so I gave him credit for that one. He still only got 1/7, which was not a passing grade of course, but he had a good laugh. Lucky mother. I grade a test used by people studying English as a second language to show their proficiency. One of the sections is a listening test where they listen to a conversation and have to answer questions about it. What's common on this portion is people hear a word that is unfamiliar to them, but they have enough skill to sound it out and attempt to spell it. One test I was grading had as an answer country. This guy did his best to spell it out and offered up C3. I admired his attempt. Another portion is a writing test, where they are given a simple prompt and just have to write on the topic. It doesn't matter how well they form an argument or anything, they just need to write enough that we can see their use of English. On one test, there was a question about snacks. Something like, what are some of your favorite snacks? This one response clearly confused snack for a similar sounding word. He basically wrote, I am strongly opposed to snacks. Snacks aren't good in my opinion. I know a lot of people like snacks and keep them around, but that is a bad idea. Some people even give snacks to kids and this is bad. Snacks shouldn't be in the home. They should be outside, away from people. Snacks can bite, and their bite is deadly. I don't know why people keep snacks as pets when they are so dangerous. I do not like snacks. Snacks can bite, and their bite is deadly. Can confirm. Was killed by a Doritos bite. Final project. Someone once named one of their variables in their MATLAB code, Mythafrikingbackonbic. There were other, unconventional variable names, but this one sticks with me. Students assume you won't read their attached code. Wrong. Answering for my mother. The question was the following. Crash test dummies are made to be as realistic as possible to ensure that crash tests produce the most accurate results possible. State a feature about them that makes them realistic. The student's answer. It has the mind of a dead person. There was always at least one chem exam that took a complicated reaction mechanism question and just wrote magic between the starting and ending compounds. Final exam on Macbeth. One of my friends didn't know how to answer a question, but because we were told never to leave it blank, wrote a detailed instructional, with pictures, on how to draw a horse. He got partial marks for communication. Red blood cells are described as disc-shaped in most books. One of my classmates had his test paper marked with a big on that question because he wrote ong-shaped cell. That's only when someone has sickle cell anemia. In microeconomics there was a question about consumer goods and this guy wrote an entire answer comparing and contrasting consumer goods and consumer bads, which was basically a short answer of what you should and shouldn't do in a retail store. Funny crap. Consumer bad sounds like a nice concept. On a university level ecotoxicology exam where the question was, is the process slow or fast? No explaining required. The student answered, yes. In a year 10 history essay about the Labour and Liberal parties during the war period, talking about various scandals, including accusations of an affair with a secretary, the climax came in the party room, before going on to talk about how the coalition crumbled. Dang sure it was deliberate. +1 point to you, student. Someone I know on their organic chemistry exam that they knew they bombed because they only answered 2 out of 5 questions drew a tombstone with RIP. my grade in one of the blank question spaces. The grading tay drew bouquets of flowers at the tombstone in red pen and everyone laughed except for the guy whose exam it was. I remember turning in my homework one time and midway through I had written break time and sketched a car driving down a road before continuing with the homework. Professor drew a person in front of the car about to get run over. Many moons ago I was marking maths school certificate exams, end of year 10 common external exams. Can't remember the question but I'll always remember the answer. I don't know, I'm only in standard, damn it. This wasn't my marking of an exam but a friend of mine. She was writing a thermodynamics exam for engineering and forgot the formula for solids and could only recall for gases. So she wrote assume potato is gas and continued on her way. Still passed the course. I once, in a moment of stupidity, forgot that the ideal gas law only applied to gases. I already had the right answer for a solid, then used ideal gas law to further define the density using the ideal gas law. I once marked a calculus test where a student scored 0%. Turns out the student copied the answers off the student next to him, but didn't realize that there were two different versions of the test to prevent this exact scenario. Honestly, I was impressed. Outside of submitting a blank test, I've never seen someone get 0%. For the aftermath, teacher pulled the kid aside the next day and called him a dumbass. He told him he'd let him off the hook with a warning this time since he can't give him much lower than a 0, and he didn't think detention would help things. Helped mark an exam for a science Olympiad competition once. The main proctor was a good-looking girl who actually administered the test. I just helped grading. One of the exams came back blank. Save something along the lines of "You're really hot. Can I have your number?" I was flattered. Just today my colleague was troubled by a student who wrote that solar energy is a form of non-renewable energy. The student argued that if the sun were to die, we cannot renew it and that makes it non-renewable. Well, technically, by that logic, there are no renewable energy sources. I was taking algorithms in college, and on one of the homeworks we had to solve a problem in which a man and a lion are in a ring together. The lion would always move as fast as the man and in a straight line towards him. The goal was to develop an algorithm that would give the man a path that would make it so the lion never caught him. This is a known problem with a real solution, but I took advantage of the poor wording. It was late the night before it was due, and said if the lion only moves as fast as the man then all the man has to do is stand still. Since the lion didn't start on top of the man, and the man stood still the lion would have to stand still and the man would never be caught. Ked. The Tay wrote haha no on my answer and gave me a 0. What do you take when you are ill? 4 letters. Painkiller. The correct answer was pill. I don't remember if that was the exact question, but the answer was pill. Faster than a bullet. Not a teacher, but during a chemistry exam one of the questions was about the bond between two ions. Friend answered friendship bond. If the ions are ladies, James Bond. Marking a year 11 GCSE English practice exam where one of the writing tasks is to explain why victimization is a bad thing and what the negative effects could be. The class I was teaching were the bottom of the barrel, but a pleasant enough group. I changed the wording on the exam to bullying rather than victimization because it would just confuse them. One kid responds with, word for word as best as I can remember. You shouldn't bully people because they might know Conor McGregor and if you hurt them then he will come to your house and kill you. Think about it, would you really want to bully someone who was friends with Conor McGregor? That was it. Despite the fact that the kid obviously had to write a lot more, I did end my feedback with but technically, you're not wrong. I was proctoring for a statistics final exam, and 5 minutes past the start time a student stood up, gathered her things, and turned in the final exam to the professor. It was completely blank except for a little note on the top. Sorry, I don't know anything. I did that this past semester with a programming exam. I filled out what I knew and wrote I can't do this anymore. I changed my major already. I got 11%. Computer science day. First time I graded, the student needed to use dart lower to turn it to lowercase, but instead they did not replace A replace, B replace, C. Simplest question on the exam, but the student wrote out a full page. Still worked so I gave them full credit. Obligatory. I'm not a teacher, but when I was a freshman in high school, I took world religions and completely bombed the question on Hinduism. Having skipped that chapter, my only knowledge of Eastern religions was what I saw in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was all there in my answer. Thuggy cults, molar ram, sacred stones, lava pits, hearts being ripped out, child slaves. It was a 20-point question. I got 0 points. The comment I got back was something like, "This is the most strong answer I have ever seen to this question." This is the most strong answer I have ever seen to this question. It's hard being the most wrong. You should be proud. I'm nearly done with my PhD and do a ton of grading as a graduate student. I always think it is so funny how people who never come to class are clueless about content write complete bulls essays so confidently. Last week I had someone write multiple pages about non-existent academic debates in comparative politics. The writing and structure was very strong, but it was all just bulls. School and bullshitting. If I've learned one thing from being in college, it's jumping through hoops and being able to bulls proficiently. Personal apologies to me as their teacher. I remember one time a student skipped writing the final essay question and instead wrote a full page on why I should pass them regardless of the fact that they have no idea what the question is about. I felt kinda guilty marking it 0 lol. I wouldn't. I'd enjoy giving that 0. I had a food technology exam and was so frustrated I basically made pot noodle as a recipe. Pretty sure the teacher knew I was taking the P, but I got full marks because it was technically not wrong. We had a lesson in English class which was about different forms of writing. To make it easy for the instructive assignment, the teacher said to do how to make a cup of tea, and one kid put his hand up to say he didn't know how to do it. The aghast and confused expressions on everyone else's face were incredibly English. Grading states standardized tests for 3rd graders. The question, what is the official name of the national anthem? Most kids knew, or sort of knew the answer, but their spelling was hilarious. Star Stankled Bonga, Stam Strangler Banjo. Would everybody please stand for the Stam Strangler Banjo? When you grade written exams, it's just a constant stream of stupidity. But one of my all-time favorites was something to the effect of, "The French were up there in Canada," slang infer to describe the reason for French colonialism. To all of you saying they weren't wrong, there's a big difference between not being wrong and being correct. There, I helped you out today. Once a kid in my A+ class wrote "The French were in Canada looking for that beaver." He got partial credit. In high school I had a biology exam on a day when I was sick as frick. Instead of getting a doctor's note and missing the exam until I was better, I tried to write it. So, I had no idea most of the stuff on this exam. Last question is explaining plants self-pollination versus being pollinated by other plants in genetic terms. I had no idea what to do, so I wrote in about a page about Asari reproduction and Asari reproduction versus Asari other species reproduction and the culture around it. I got part marks because I kinda hit some of the points he wanted, and because it amused him. So I wrote in about a page about Asari reproduction and Asari reproduction versus Asari other species reproduction and the culture around it. I actually researched this when I started playing those games, and TBH you could write several academic papers on it. I used to help my ex grade spelling tests for her 3rd graders, and one boy had excellent handwriting until he couldn't remember how to spell a word. That's when certain letters would start to look suspiciously similar and closer together. I guess he thought if the teacher couldn't quite make out the word, she would just give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm in uni and still sometimes do this. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I was going through some old stuff a couple of years ago and found a cache of selected papers from my high school days. Graduated in 1988. Included in the cache was an AP biology exam that included a short essay section set up in the format of choose 2 of the 4 questions to answer. You can answer a third for extra credit if you so desire. I chose 2 and gave fairly bland but relatively complete answers to them. The kind of answers that get you 13/15 points or such. For the extra credit option, I chose the one that said, using a basic hamburger, bun and meat only, explain the complete workings of the digestive tract from end to end. I wrote it as a child's story called Mr. Hamburger Gets Digested using very short and simple sentences. I illustrated it in places. According to the comment on the document, My instructor found this absolutely hilarious, but also accurate. I got maximum credit. I give a practical course on digital signal processing. The students have to use and modify some Python code we provide and analyze the results. They deliver a Jupyter notebook with their report, along with some auxiliary files in a .zip file. A couple of funny things happened this semester. First, a couple of students send me a .zip file with their report along with the report from a previous semester they copied from. Second, a couple of students send me a report and one of the ID numbers doesn't match any of theirs. I look up the wrong ID number and find that it is from a student in a different group for the same course. I compare several of their reports and find plagiarism in a couple of them. My students are really dumb. I had a grown man scribble notes in the margins detailing how questions could be worded better, how the graphs should be bigger, gave me examples of better questions, and even wrote me sentences about how I'm trying to trick him by making C the obvious answer but D was the correct one. He did not do nearly as well as he thought he did. LOL, rather than you asking this question, you should phrase it differently so that the answer would be the one I know. A friend of mine wrote in the answer space I don't know the answer because teacher's name did not cover this topic as a joke but forgot to erase it before submitting it. Needless to say my teacher wasn't too impressed, haha. When I was taking Calculus 2 in university, I didn't know how to solve one of the final essay questions. I drew a pinata with a sombrero instead. Got partial credit on the question. What the frick kind of calculus teacher makes you write an essay? Years ago, in high school, I took AP Spanish at a public school. The AP exam had a speaking portion, which we all had to record simultaneously on these old cassette recorders. These things manipulated our voices to the point where we sounded like highly excited kittens taking hits of helium. Now imagine 40 teens in one HOI room. That poor grader. I'm sitting here at my desk giggling at the idea of a hyperactive helium-sucking kitten looking at the pile of tapes saying clastomer. In 10th grade our county has a gateway about a social studies topic which determines if you can graduate or not. My teacher showed me a past essay where a kid drew the best eagle that I have seen in my life. He didn't write a single word for the essay, just a brilliantly drawn eagle that took him 3 hours. Definitely not what the prompt was asking for when it asked about the American Revolution. I'm not a teacher but, well, technically speaking I was a teacher long time ago. I got the story about my uncle. He did an engineering degree in agriculture. One day in some exam, a friend was pestering my uncle about sharing answers. He was annoyed and did tell him the first thing that it did come to his mind. Next day, the teacher returned the graded exams but the last one was his friend's. Then the teacher proceeded to read the question and the answer. This is a very unusual answer, but it was too good to leave it unnoticed. How you do control a plague of mice in a corn plantation? 3 cats per acre. It did happen 30 years ago and we still give crap to his friend about it. I mean, he's not wrong. That's how we started domesticated cats in this country. Professor that I TA'd for would have an animal of the semester. Let's call it Snubkins. He would mention it in class, in tests, and so forth, encouraging students to draw Snubkins if they finished exams or quizzes early since they were not allowed to leave. Final exam comes around. A student, instead of doing the coding questions, writes an essay about how some Snubkins aren't meant to code. Not a teacher, but as a student in high school history another student started out his essay about the causes of the American Civil War as you would, then halfway through started outlining the plot to Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. I may still have a photo of the essay, it was too funny. On my AP US history exam, I gave up on an essay question about the effects of the American Revolution and wrote out the lyrics for America. Frick yeah from Team America. When taking a geography exam my freshman year of college, my teacher stated in the exam, in 1920 Africans were brought to the English colony of Jamestown, Virginia. Historians are undecided if the legal practice of slavery began there, since at least some of them had the status of indentured servant. With this in mind, draw a Triceratops wearing glasses. I had a bonus question that asked who founded Rhode Island. One student, a high schooler in Providence, answered the Romans. All roads led to Rome. There was an oral spelling test for second graders and one of the words was pennies. I got back 5 tests spelling at Piatnis. I'll never forget a physics exam I had. I nailed this thing except for one question where I couldn't remember one of the 2 names. This is 25 years ago and to this day I still remember the answer. It was about the Fizzo-Foucault apparatus. I could remember Foucault's name but not Fizzo, so I just answered Foucault and his buddy. I got a motherfucking 99%. Once I couldn't remember the exact definition for the Warsaw Pact, so I just wrote the communist version of NATO and got a 100% on the test. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.